So if you just think a little bit, occasionally you will just stub your toe against stuff which would suggest, why are people a certain kind of way? It's because of their genes. I've come across this kind of mechanism for unpacking stuff about crime. Actually, why do people do a certain thing? Well, we might look at their parenting, and that's partly about the way they were brought up, but maybe it runs in the family. Certainly I've come across this in terms of mental health. It's not uncomplicated. There is a dimension to which this is true, and actually there's quite an important dimension to which this is an untrue statement. So it's a necessary statement, but it's not a sufficient statement. It's introduced those two philosophical categories, necessary but not sufficient. I have to include a biological explanation, but if I simply stop there, it would be insufficient. Right, here are a spectrum of ways of looking at reality. Okay, we started up with one, a sort of reductionist model, everything can be explained in terms of genetics. And I've just put before you a sample of things that one might study at university or A-level for explaining the world. Let's just play a game, a very simple game. The game is, why is Mark's hair the way it is? How would we play this game if we were a biologist? Let's start with the easy one. Why is my hair the way it is?
Because it's grown and it's your genes.
Because my genes. Okay, so if you could get into my genes, what would they tell you about my hair?
It's colour.
Colour, straightness. Yeah. Whether it's thick, texture. Okay, right, fine. Okay. Necessary. Is it sufficient? What would a chemist tell you about my hair?
It's made of keratin. It's made of keratin.
Okay.
And it's you might have put something in it.
Chemicals in it.
Okay. Now, just notice what we've done. We've shifted domain from biology to chemistry, and immediately there's been an outpouring of different kinds of answers. So when you wear your biology glasses, you see one thing. When you put your chemistry glasses on, you're enabled to see something else. We've moved from talking about DNA to talking about keratin. Okay, what I've just done with you is what you could call a layered explanation of reality. So you could, in theory at least, take any particular phenomena and unpack it in different layers. And then there's a question of, do we have to choose between them? And why might we choose between them? And you might want to be slightly kind of revolutionary about this. Is it possible that some forms of knowledge actually come out to us because of social circumstance, because of the cultures we live in? That actually very little money is spent on the philosophy of hair, but loads of money is spent on its chemistry. Is it possible that money might determine the way we think? Possibly, I don't know. No longer Mark's hair. What is a human?
70% oxygen. No, 70% water.
Okay, there speaks the chemist. Necessary but sufficient? Okay. But this is also, in a strange kind of way, a map of existence. We start, as far as we know, with a Big Bang, and the discipline that looks at that is physics. And you wind forward a certain amount of time, and matter coalesces, and eventually you have things that are called chemicals. And you wind forward a bit further, and those chemicals clump together, and they start to create these life forms. And which discipline would study those? Biology. And those biological animals begin to develop nervous systems, and eventually you get primitive brains, and the discipline that would study those is psychology. And then those brains begin to form communities which are conscious. They exchange things to survive. And the discipline that would study that would be economics. And then over time, these societies form. The discipline that studies those is history. And then certain ideas float free of history, things about goodness and truth. You can pick up a book that Plato wrote about Socrates, and it's as true now as it was back then. philosophy emerges or poetry emerges out of history. And then possibly theologians would say out of philosophy a subset emerges that says there's an infinite beyond, a transcendent. So you could say that this is an emergent universe, a map of emergence that does this. And that a layered explanation enables you to articulate each level of emergence. One last thing to leave you with. It's possible, and this is the bit I really like, if this is broadly speaking true, here's an emergent universe, you need to step up to a new discipline and change your vocabulary to understand it in a more complex way, to get a sufficient explanation, not just a necessary one. It's possible that we've come to the stage within the evolution of the universe where something rather odd has happened, in which at various points we've begun to turn around, so that out of history emerges people who can consciously choose to, for example, set up hospitals where chemotherapy happens, where we change our chemistry, or we change our biology through
genetic
engineering, or we set up nuclear power stations, so we changed physics. So although we are in a sense created out of, we've emerged out of, we've now got to the stage where we can reflect back. We are in a bizarre point in which we are not fully determined by what has created us. We can ourselves affect it. Not in a way that's unrelated. I can never step out of my physics, but I've got to a point where actually I can start messing with my physics. So I want to leave you on that kind of rather mind-blowing point in which we appear to have evolved in the universe to a point where we can understand and actually start to create ourselves.